Welcome to Series 2 of the Shark Trust podcast. We are joined today by some very special guests for this special bonus episode on Oceanic 31. So without any further ado, I'm going to go through the amazing artists that are joining us today. Can we start off with Rachel? Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about you as an artist and what you kind of do.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rachel Brooks. I'm a wildlife artist, but my background's in zoology and wildlife guiding and scuba instructing, and that has inspired most of what I do art-wise. So I'm a scientific illustrator, and I also create ink artworks that celebrate the diversity and biodiversity of ecosystems.
Thank you very much. And next up we have Nina.
So my name is Nina Rossiter, or Janina Rossiter. I'm a children's book author, artist, and illustrator. Also, I used to be a graphic designer only before I started getting into conservation. And so I work a lot with children in schools to raise awareness, because the younger generation is really important to me to start at the basis, basically, before we grow up and do the mistakes later in life. So
Thank you very much. And next up we've got Jimmy, or James, sorry.
Either or. My name's James Higgs, or Jimmy. I'm a designer and artist, and I'm also head of creative at a studio called Revo One. How I got into this is just a love of drawing, and our paths managed to cross at some point, so very grateful for that. So yeah.
Fantastic, thank you, James. And then we've got Janavi.
So my name is Janavi Kramer, and I'm an ocean artist and scientific illustrator. I work primarily in watercolour, and I use my work to showcase the unparalleled wonders of our ocean, and also to shine a light on the threats impacting the inhabitants and the ocean.
Fantastic. And finally we have got Abigail.
Hi, I'm Abigail Burt, and I mainly use sculpture as a medium to work with a public audience, to engage them with things around environmentalism and conservation. I'm really interested in sort of how social practice can truly make a difference. So I'm currently doing a PhD researching what is the role of art and the artist to communicate marine science.
Thank you all so much. So the reason I really want to talk to all of these amazing people you've just heard from is because at the Shark Trust, we developed Oceanic 31. This is an art exhibition made up of 31 pieces, which are different species of oceanic sharks and rays. This kind of stemmed from a paper that came out in 2021, which identified 31 species of oceanic sharks and rays that are threatened with extinction. So Oceanic 31, the art exhibition came around, which is 31 different species of oceanic sharks and rays and 31 different artists. So each artist gets to choose one of the species, and then they can use their own medium. So it's not only showing the diversity of sharks and rays, but also the diversity of different types of art. I'm now going to go through the different artists that you've just heard from, and they're going to tell you a bit about the species they chose and how they've created their piece. So Rachel, if we can start with you. Also, if you haven't listened to Series 1, Rachel was on Series 1 in episode 7, so definitely check that one out, as she talks about this species in detail.
Yeah, so if you listen to our last podcast, it'll be a bit of a spoiler alert that I chose to do my piece on the basking shark. So I live on the west coast of Scotland, which is actually a huge hotspot for this species, and I was fortunate enough to work with them at sea for 3 years before becoming a full-time wildlife artist. So I spent a lot of time up close in the water with basking sharks, and which is an absolute privilege. They're really, really quite rare to see, and we're really lucky to have them here off the coast of Scotland. So seeing that they're still quite a reasonably unknown species, being the second largest shark in the world, it was just a no-brainer for me to choose the basking shark. I find them absolutely fascinating, and yeah, I've got quite a personal connection to them as well. So my artwork is in ink and watercolour, And inside the species, if you look a little bit closer, you'll see there's lots of hidden details, and that's all sorts of other things that you can see here in the marine environment in Scotland and the UK as well. And yeah, I used it as a bit of a celebration of our UK seas in general. I think the basking shark is a really amazing animal that we have here.
And you mentioned it there, and I really want to draw on it because it's like one of the things that people talk about at all the exhibitions that we've kind of been to. The species that you've got inside of the actual basking shark. Do you want to talk about a couple of those and how it is that basking sharks connect with that whole ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think sharks as a whole play a really important part in the ecosystems in which they inhabit, and it's not necessarily always thought about in that way. But as being a large animal in an environment, you play a really important role.
Next up, we're going to talk to Nina about her piece. Nina, could you tell us kind of what species, why you chose that species, and how you made it? Because yours is amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. So it's a tiny bit of a longer story before, because I wasn't a diver and I wasn't really into sharks before I got into artwork, the love of sharks. And so everything kind of happened a little bit naturally. I got into plastic pollution because I went to the aquarium with my girls and there was a show on. And so I was on this route to write a book about plastic pollution. Then I had my first exhibition, and I worked together with an organization, and the organization said, well, we're going to give you a few videos of some of our videographers to play in your exhibition. And they happened to be shark lovers, and I happened to, because it was really quiet at my exhibition during the day, I had hardly any visitors, so I was just sitting there watching these videos of people swimming with sharks, and so many different sharks I have never seen before, and I started to really feel bad for not appreciating them enough. So I created my very first artwork, which was like a heart made out of sharks, because I felt they were so misunderstood. And we needed to give them a lot more love, and that's how everything started. So after that, I thought, what can I do for sharks? So I got contacted by the Shark Guardian, which asked me if I could help them with their shark finning campaign. And so I've been very, very active and vocal to speak up about shark finning, first for the UK and then for the EU. So I felt when John asked me if I wanted to participate. For me, the shark that made sense for me was the big-eyed treasure shark, because of that long fin, and I just feel it's such a fascinating creature. Also, because I'm a swimmer, I love apnea, I love freediving, and this long fin just fascinates me. So there was several love for that shark. And as I'm sometimes trying to give in my artwork an artivism message, like a hidden message that is not too cruel or upsetting, because I work a lot with children, and sometimes I do things that are a little bit more obvious, but with children I kind of want them to discover for themselves. So I actually have the artwork here. I printed it. So I wanted to make the tail moving, and that's why in the artwork there are several layers. So there are several layers of ink, and then you have a transparency that goes over it, and then another layer. So just to give that a movement, to draw specific attention to that tail that can be as long as the body, which I think is just fascinating. So that was the idea behind it, to ask questions. People ask questions, why are there 3 tails? And then you can start talking, because tails are a problem for shark fin soup, and it opens up the conversation in a positive way, I would say, and that's what I wanted to provoke with that piece.
Fantastic. And yeah, it is an amazing piece, especially with those layers, because you can literally see them like in the original piece, where you have layered them up, and yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And then next up, we're then going to switch to I keep saying Jimmy. Do you prefer Jimmy or James?
You can call me what you like, Mark. It's up to you.
Jimmy Higgs. So I go to Jimmy. So I just want to say firstly as well, if you're listening to this on Spotify, you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you're watching on, and you look at the little Shark Trust podcast logo that's on there, that was made by the Rev 01 studio due to Jimmy. We've also got a artist collaboration t-shirt range on the sharktrustclothing.com as well. So definitely check those out. But yeah, sorry for taking you away from that. But Jimmy, could you now please tell us about the species you chose, why you chose it, and how you made your piece?
Yeah, so the species that I chose, when I saw the list, there was still quite a lot left on there, and I saw the great white shark was on there still, which, you know, it doesn't need too much explanation why it's such a well-known shark for whatever reason, which is quite an interesting one because I think a lot of people love sharks because of that film. A lot of people fear them. But anyway, I didn't make a decision straight away. And the reason being is I wanted to go for this one. That's the ego. And then the fear of stepping out of my comfort zone is the other thing. So I had a bit of an inner battle, but I decided I want to step out of my comfort zone a little bit more. And I decided to go for that one. The other driving factor in it is I thought, what would my son be most impressed by? Also, given the style that, you know, I create my art in, you know, it's fairly sort of cartoon style. I thought we could sort of play on a softer side to it, and I thought that could appeal to a younger audience. So that being said, that's pretty much why I chose it. Also, I've got a little bit of thing of, it sounds weird saying that, you know, a shark like a great white shark can be an underdog, but given what we just said, I feel like they're seen in a bit of a tainted light. So I think if we can shine sort of any positivity on them, then it's only a good thing.
No, completely. Yeah, I think sometimes because the great white shark is so well known, we kind of try to avoid it because we're like, people already know about it, we'll try and avoid it. But sometimes it is amazing to like bring it back in and just show all these amazing qualities that it does have. Do you want to talk about talk about your style, because it is this kind of like cartoony kind of like, and then the actual original piece has got all these amazing little details that you've added to that one as well.
Yeah, so I mainly work in digital, which, you know, it has its pros and cons to it. I can undo stuff if I make a mistake, so I feel like I'm slightly cheating compared to these guys. But at the same time, I get in my head so much about it. I think I redrew that piece about 30 times, like the amount of hours went into it. But, you know, I'm still happy with it now, so it was worth it. So yeah, it's a big piece, a big digital print. We got it printed in G-clay ink, so it really maintained the colour. But then to finish it off, I finished it with some silver leaf just to give it a little bit of, you know, when it catches the light, some of the splashes of water, some of the reflections on the shark really shine through. So yeah, hopefully when it's like hanging in the galleries, it catches a little bit of sunlight and it sort of can really show.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. Yeah, like when we've put the exhibition up and gone around, people, I think with like a lot of the pieces, they kind of look at them and then the moment they look closer, they see there's all these other extra bits in there. And yeah, that like silver sparkles in there, people definitely catch. So it's amazing. And then next up, we're going to switch down to Janavi. Janavi, could you please tell us about the species you chose, your piece, how you came up with it, and yeah.
For sure. So I actually chose the scalloped hammerhead shark. And for me, this actually came from a really personal experience. Just before Connor reached out to me, I had just got back from a trip to the Red Sea, and I had gone there with the hope of encountering hammerhead sharks, and we were successful. We did see them underwater, and for me it was my first time seeing hammerheads, and it was also my first time seeing schooling sharks, which I was really excited about. And that moment when they sort of came out of the murky blue towards us, I remember just feeling really overwhelmed and just completely in awe, because they really are like evolutionary perfection. The way that their bodies are is incredible, and the way they sort of effortlessly glide through the water. And, you know, they came really close. You could see their eyes really locking onto you and sussing you out as much as you were sussing them out. And when we got back on the boat, I was just raving and like couldn't stop talking about how incredible I thought the encounter was. And I turned to the guides to sort of like get their feedback on it, and I sort of noticed that they seemed quite solemn, quite sad, and I was really confused by that at first. So I started chatting with them, and it turns out several of the guides on the boat had actually been dive guides in the area for several decades, and they were almost saddened by the experience because they said that every time they do a season there, they notice there's a really quite drastic decline year on year. And I was really taken back by that because I still thought it was an incredible experience, and I think anyone that's in the water who gets to see or encounter a shark is really lucky, whether it's 1 or 20. But the fact that, you know, people that are sort of working in the ocean industry, when they are literally seeing the decline happen right in front of their eyes, and to sort of have their perspective on that was really impactful for me. And so when I got back, I kept thinking about this, and I was trying to figure out how could I tell this story and what could I do to kind of have an impact and spread awareness of that issue. And that's when Connor reached out to me. So it was really, couldn't have been more perfect timing. And I was really excited to see that on the list of species that they wanted, that the Shark Trust wanted to highlight, there was the scalloped hammerhead. So obviously I immediately jumped for that. And I basically created the piece called Deep Connection, and I painted it from the point of view of myself being the diver, sort of slightly below them, and seeing this incredible school of majestic sharks coming over. And for me, what I really hope that the piece kind of, the impression that it gives to the people that look at it is the deep connection that you feel when you're in the presence of apex predators, because there's nothing really quite like it. You suddenly, you know, humans have this sort of issue of thinking we're the most incredible species on the planet and taking over the world kind of thing, but really it is, you know, things like sharks that have been around, you know, predating dinosaurs and trees. You know, they've been around for hundreds of millions of years, and when you're in their presence you really see why, because they're just perfection in their anatomical structure and the way that they sort of dominate the space that they're in. So yeah, I created Deep Connection, and it's a large scale watercolor piece, and I hope that it kind of gives the people that see it the same sort of appreciation and awe of why we should be protecting these species.
Yeah, it was an absolutely incredible piece, Deep Connection. So yeah, hopefully people listening can go and check it out. And if not, there is also a virtual tour of Oceanic 31 where you can look at all the pieces online. And then finally, we're going to go to Abigail. Abigail, could you tell us a bit about the species you chose, and then how on earth you made your piece, because it is out of this world?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, my whole what am I saying? My whole sort of story around making this piece for the Shark Trust is a really interesting, a really beautiful sort of pivotal moment in my journey as an artist, because before that I'd done this sort of, so my background's in bronze casting, basically. I specialised in the literal sort of casting of bronze. And I was on holiday one day and I was reading this book, and it was actually about the depletion of insects in the wildlife. And I was suddenly so moved to make all of my art practice around the environment and about the decline of species that I went and did a master's and started thinking about how can art connect with people to talk about conservation. Anyway, forward wind, and I did this project called Lost Facts for Lost Species, which was actually calling out for sort of 100 or so artists to make endangered species, which I cast in bronze and then auctioned to raise money for conservation. And then at some point, Connor had seen that, so he invited me to do a piece of my own for the Shark Trust, Oceanic 31. And quite honestly, you know, in that whole 100 species for the other project, there wasn't a single shark, and I had no prior relationship with sharks. I came to this with my passion for species decline in general, and I chose the longhorn pygmy devil ray because, I mean, when I was looking at all the sharks, when you see images of these in a school, it's absolutely beautiful. The sort of aesthetic of them all together is so striking. So it was a really nice opportunity for me to sort of make my own piece of bronze and make a piece depicting sort of that beautiful aesthetic of them all together. So yeah, it's a bronze cast piece. It's a sort of, in a way, it's like a plaque. It's a low relief image, like a painting, but actually when you go up and look at it, it's a piece of bronze, and it's got the carving of all of the rays in sort of fine relief. And I really like the idea of using the surface in quite a painterly way. So when I patinated it, which is the process of heating up the bronze and then applying different chemicals to get different colours, I was really enjoying capturing that sort of the movement of the school of the rays through the water, but in the metal. So it was a really enjoyable process for me as a maker anyway. And then, I mean, going on from that, my attendance to the For the Love of Sharks actually inspired me so much, sitting there and hearing about all of the sharks and hearing what the Shark Trust do, that I had this sort of new moment where I wanted to dedicate my art practice more specifically to marine science. And it was through talking to Connor that I actually ended up applying for the PhD, which he told me about, in Portsmouth. So my whole journey has sort of been shaped by making this piece with the Shark Trust. So I'm so happy for being a part of this. And I believe so passionately that art does have a place in bringing a wider audience into knowing about and connecting with and loving the species on the planet. Really, it's a strong form of communication that reaches people outside of science, and those people that might not seek sort of the information, or it might go over their heads, might see a piece of artwork and then be inspired to learn more about it, or so yeah, that's me and the artwork.
That's amazing. I didn't realize that it was specifically like doing this piece and talking with Connor that inspired you to do your PhD. So that's quite a lovely little story as well. I still remember when me and Connor drove up to London to come pick up your piece, and neither of us knew kind of anything about bronze. So we kind of just like pulled up, and you kind of walked quite casually with this like bronze plaque in between the two bits of wood, and kind of you looked so casual carrying it, and you handed it to me. I almost dropped the thing. Like, it is so heavy, and it's like quite big. So I could have smashed it within like the first 30 seconds of having it. But it's an absolutely incredible piece, and yeah, that is very strong. But those chemicals that you've put on it and made those kind of color changes on it is absolutely wild. But yeah, so heavy as well. Thank you so much. We are now going to take a very, very quick break, and you're going to hear from Hetty on how you can help sharks and the work we do at the Shark Trust.
Hey, I'm Hetty. Thanks for listening to the Shark Trust podcast. Did you know that you can support our work protecting sharks and rays? Here's just some of the ways you can help today. Join our community of passionate shark supporters and gain access to exclusive events and content by becoming a Shark Trust member. You can adopt these incredible animals, directly supporting our conservation efforts and research projects. Make a donation today. Every donation makes a huge difference. Your contribution will go towards funding our vital work all across the world. And finally, if you want to get more hands-on, you can take part in our citizen science projects. Your data and observations are invaluable to understanding the world of sharks. Together, we can make a difference. Visit our website to find out more and take action today.
Welcome back to the Shark Trust podcast. Thank you for listening to that amazing little advert from Hetty. So we're back here with the artists from Oceanic 31, and we've now learnt about the pieces they've done, the species they've chosen, and why they need so much help. And now we're going to go into a bit more detail on how art and conservation works together to aid conservation. Like how do these things get together? So does anyone talk about kind of how does art reach these kind of new audiences? How is it helping conservation in ways that other means kind of don't? How is it different to other things? Jimmy?
I just got to say, I've got to be careful what I say about art as well, because at any point I don't want to put it above any other form like photography. I just want to put that out there as a disclaimer first. But no, I think, I mean, you've touched on it already. With art, you can have so many different styles. I mean, with everyone's pieces here, they're so different. And art can, evoke such strong emotions in people. And those emotions might come from different pieces. So you're reaching all different types of people for different reasons, where, something like video photography can do. But also, it's so much more accessible. Like, its language, it speaks globally. People can look at a piece of art for hours. They can just stand there taking it in, and everyone can have their own thoughts about it. So I think that as a medium for conservation, it strikes really strong emotions with people. And I think with anything, I work with brands on a daily basis, and the most important thing that we can get someone to do is feel an affinity with that brand or with that thing. So it means something to. I mean, we've all got brands that we go and buy and we love, and I think it's that same feeling that we seek in human beings to feel a connection with something, and art's fantastic for that.
Fantastic. No, yeah, I completely agree. I like that kind of like international language, because you've not got to speak it or read it to be able to take it in. And yeah,
exactly. Any age group, anyone.
Yeah, fantastic. Janavi, I also saw that you were going to say something as well.
Yeah, I think I very much agree with Jimmy. I think that's the real sort of true power of visual forms. And I think very much like when I think of art, I think, I actually think of like things like photography and videography. It's all inclusive. It's like a visual form of storytelling. And I think that's why often as an artist, I find that, organisations and companies don't place enough emphasis on art in terms of when they're thinking about their budget or whatever, like whether it is for, publishing a paper or whether it's for a new branding campaign or something like that. Like, the visual aid to that is often, in my opinion, one of the most important elements that you can't do without. In the world we live in, everywhere you look, even wherever you're sat right now, everywhere you look, there is an element of design or art, whether that's your laptop or your lamp, whatever it is. It's such a crucial part of our every single day life and the way we function. And very much so, it is a universal language. And just as Jimmy was saying, it kind of destroys the barriers of communication. If you speak a different language from whatever part of the world you're in, or your culture or your background, your career, it kind of breaks all of that down, and it puts everyone on a level playing field, if you will. And I think that's what's so incredible about Oceanic 31 as well, is that you have got all of these completely different interpretations of not necessarily the same subject, but the same subject matter. And so for people that came to see the exhibition or are able to view it online, I think my biggest takeaway from that was how incredible it was to see these different species in completely different lights and the different stories that they tell. And hopefully, if you've been to see it, you would have found at least one that really connected to you and spoke to you on a different level, and hopefully inspired bigger change. And I think it's I hope that we sort of start to see a bigger emphasis on how important that is, because it's such a powerful tool. Like, in order to make real waves of change in conservation, we need to find ways of making that data and the knowledge that scientists have and make it more accessible and digestible for, I don't want to say like the general public, but, like everyone, because that's the only way we're going to make an impact, is if everyone starts to be able to understand what's actually happening to our planet and what's happening to the species that inhabit it.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think, because Oceanic 31's kind of the first time, I think we've had some like mini art projects where we've been like, hey members, we draw a picture of sharks and like send them in to us. But I think this is the first time we've kind of used it to like highlight this like huge like campaign that we're doing. And is because usually we're talking about the stats, we're talking about the science, and it can be very heavy in like science and policy. And I think then we kind of sometimes lose people because they're like, that's a lot of words, a lot of numbers, and maybe that's not for me. So I think kind of the beauty of Oceanic 31, that I think even when we started it, we didn't realize how much impact it would have, is now suddenly loads of people love it. It's spreading the message to people that wouldn't have even looked at our work before. Like when we produce a booklet or something like that with like the stats of kind of our shark conservation stuff, like they wouldn't have even picked that up and looked at it. Whereas now you've got people from all over the UK and globally, to be fair, looking at it, being like, wow, like that piece of artwork is really, really amazing. And then also because it's 31 different artists, that's 31 other people who are also pushing it out to their kind of networks and the people that know them as well. So there's even more people kind of being involved in the kind of conservation zone. And yeah, it's been absolutely incredible. Nina, I did see that you had your hand up as well, and I know you're very heavily involved in conservation all around. So yeah, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I obviously I agree with what has already been said, but I also wanted to add that as a personal experience, I feel sometimes, especially in the light of when there's a public group, I feel very shy to speak up. And I think lots of artists might have the same feeling, that they have the emotions that they want to say something, but they have difficulties to go and speak in front of people. And I think with artwork, it speaks for itself, and that's the beauty of it. It does its work, and you put yourself out there. You're vulnerable as an artist because people might not like it, but you still do it. And I think especially when you work with children, they are not, they don't worry about what they create what they feel. And I think that's something we can really learn from, and it's beautiful. So I just wanted to add that as well, where art plays a big role.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely amazing. I think as well, like I do it all the time because me and Louis, who is here, I'm gonna get him on camera at the end. We do like a lot of the like comms work at the Shark Trust, and kind of like trying to picture or kind of like come up with wording to use and stuff like that can be like so difficult, especially when you're trying to get like emotion into it, but then also be like scientific and all this sort of stuff. So I think, yeah, being able to literally have a piece that says all of that, and people can get an emotion that they feel from it, not just one that I'm being like, oh, I kind of want them to feel a little bit sad, but also optimistic. Like they'll feel that themselves and they'll find that themselves. And I think that's kind of even more impactful. I think impactful is a word.
And the domino effect that it has, like one art piece has a huge domino effect to others. So yeah.
Fantastic. And then Abigail, I also saw your hand up. And seeing as you're doing like research into a PhD into art conservation, you've probably got you're like the expert in the field.
Yeah, I mean, again, I definitely agree with everything that's been said so far. And I think the thing is, art's just such a huge word. Art can be a drawing a child makes to give their parents as a sort of gift and an act of love, or it can be a huge painting that depicts the emotions of war that's going on. And both of those things, for a start, connect with emotion. Art's very emotional. And I was going to say really that I think the time that it takes to make a piece of artwork, whatever that medium is read by the audience. So when someone stands in front of a piece of artwork, they sort of, I want to say instinctively sort of measure the marks made, or like the sort of care that's been taken to frame it or whatever. And that then sort of incites a sense of wanting to respect it by give it time and sort of understand why that time's been taken. So I think there is something really magical about this sort of communication that art has that's outside of words and writing, which is through the very essence of the fact that it's being made by hand, and an individual's putting that amount of care into it. I mean, there's so many roles of art, I think, when it comes to conservation, and outside of individual pieces of art being made like that, there's also sort of social practice. So artists that are going and using art to bring audiences into actually being makers themselves. And that's for some people that they don't necessarily take the time in their everyday to make, but they maybe did as a child, and being given that space to sit down and make enables people to then take that time to think about the subject. So if you're using that to talk about conservation, it's really powerful because it's bringing people into this space. And highlighting a topic through the act of making itself. So there's so many reasons. I agree with everyone that, I mean, that's why we're all here, right? We all really believe that art can make a difference to the world of conservation.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And yeah, I've loved, basically echoing absolutely everything you guys have just said about it being this international language. It's bringing this whole emotional depth that you don't get in other forms, and just connecting with other people. Because again, with the, like Janavi said, if you've seen the exhibition, there will be at least one piece that you will have connected with so much, even if all the other pieces you're like, that's not really my cup of tea. But there'll be one piece, and that could be the piece that kind of gets you into conservation. Maybe then go and support, like the Big Shark Pledge, which Oceanic 31's kind of promoting, and that will make a huge impact, because every one person that sees it, if every person that goes to the exhibition is connecting with at least one thing, they're going to support it. Like I've spoken with Rachel before, and I think you've all kind of told me this at some point, that you kind of protect what you love, and you love what you learn, and you learn or I can't remember what the complete quote is now off the top of my head. But basically, once you see it, you then want to protect it, and that kind of little domino effect goes into conservation kind of from the artwork, and it all kind of builds up. You become more informed, and then you might even make a huge, massive, life-changing thing like doing a PhD, like Abigail did as well, from it, which will then help even further. So, yeah, all these amazing changes kind of work around. And then I was kind of thinking of the different audiences, because you've all got such kind of different audiences that you kind of go to. Like some of you work, like Jamie works in graphic design. A lot of you are quite big on Instagram. Some of you are going to like United Nations things as well. Like, how do you think art works with different audiences? Do you think art, you have to change the type of art you do for different audiences, or do you think that you kind of make a piece of artwork and you can take it to different audiences and they kind of feel different things? What kind of do you think about that? Yeah, Jimmy.
I think I said this at the last For the Love of Sharks event. I don't think any artist should ever have to change their style or the art they create to suit an audience. I think if you're true to yourself, you will find your audience. And the truth of the matter is, you can't please everyone. And if you try and please everyone, you'll probably end up pleasing no one. So the key to anything, art, music, anything like that, stay true to yourself, and people will listen and you'll be heard.
Yeah, pretty okay that actually. Does anyone else got any thoughts as well? Yeah, Janavi?
It sort of touches on what we were speaking about just a moment ago, but I think like Jimmy was saying, like, you don't have to change your art. Like, I've never found myself in a situation where I've been like asked to change the style depending on a context. I think often when you're working in the industry that people come to you because of what you do. And I think very much the power of art is the way that it connects with people on a really human level. So I think sometimes the context is almost irrelevant. Like, the context of what the work is doing, it changes, but in terms of the people and who is perceiving it, the whole kind of, I guess the point behind art is like, how does it impact you on a deeper level? And I think the intent that you create the work with isn't always the emotion that the people feel when they look at it. Like, you could create something, I don't know, out of anger. You see like these really abstract artists that create like these very like emotional pieces, but it might have a complete opposite impact on the person looking at it. They may see that and it's their interpretation of the work. So I think that, you know, being able to, all of us, take our work into these different places, like, is really powerful because of what it does to people on a human level, regardless of the context, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah, Abigail, go.
I was just going to add that, agreeing with James, I think authenticity is something that we really feel and connect with. So, and also I was going to add that I think some people put themselves in these boxes, or they grow up and they think they don't like art anymore, and then they'll be surprised because when they see something and they connect with it, it's maybe something that they hadn't thought they would connect with. And if you just keep making art that's true to yourself and has that that sort of authenticity, then people will connect to. Maybe you would think if you had a conversation with them before that, you'd need to make something in a certain way, but then because it's a true sort of expression, then they actually connect with it. Or, you know, when I've run workshops and people will come and be like, oh, I can't make art, like I'm not creative, and then you sort of warm them up a bit, and then they make incredible things and they have the best time. So art's really something that's everyone can connect with, I think.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've never really thought about it like that, because I think a lot of the work we do, we identify our audience and then we make our work so that it fits that audience. Whereas I guess with art, you kind of create your art and what you're passionate about, and then your audience is going to find it because that's what they're drawn to, isn't it? I guess because it is so visual. I've never really thought about it like that. That's quite amazing. Yeah, Nina?
Yeah, I have something to add to that because I feel like I've worked about 14 years before I started to be a freelance artist in graphic design for design agencies, luxury agencies in Paris. And it was always like, we are a team, we propose designs, and then we're like, we take this, we take this, we take this. And then in the end, they just changed like a tiny little thing on their existing packaging or in the existing design. You're like, oh my God, all this stuff we've done. And I think that was one of the reasons why I wanted to break out of this. And it's like, I'm going to do what I think is right, and nobody going to tell me how to change it, because I got so fed up with like, it not being what I kind of thought it could be, and it's really difficult when you work for clients. And then I think when I had this epiphany moment with plastic pollution, I actually came home and I spent an evening crying because I saw images that made me so upset. And I think that was one of the reasons where I decided that I want to create artwork for children, but I don't want to have them being devastated or upset, and I think there I adapted, but it was more out of because I was convinced myself it's not a good thing, because I think we get desensitized when we see horrible things all the time, and I think you have to see beauty and you have to discover, and that's where I but where I thought that was important. But it's not to please the audience, it's more because I am convinced that is the right way to do.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. And yeah, I think that is you being true to yourself, kind of like, the other said, like with your own artwork, that is your artwork. Abigail, did you put your hand up again?
I was just going to say, whilst listening to Nina, I was thinking about your piece, Nina, and how you have the three tails, and what we haven't spoken about, I think, which is such an important side of art, is the fact that it can use the imagination and it can provoke questions. And its very power is in the fact that it's poetic and it's not didactic. It will not tell the audience what they should hear or what they should know. So it doesn't have to sort of lay out a scientific fact to engage. It can have three tails, and then people can sort of question why is it, and then go into it and get excited or whatever. And that poetic and imaginative side of it is such a beautiful, powerful tool, really.
Fantastic. Jimmy?
I was just going to say, adding on from that, a great example of that where, sometimes you said earlier, Mark, about when you've got facts and figures and stuff and photos, sometimes they can be easily forgotten, but a great example that has lived on in my memory is the animation done for the Big Shark Pledge. I watched it a few times when it came out. I can still remember it the whole way through. It was fantastic. And I think I saw something on social media maybe a couple of days ago. I think it might be up for an award or something.
It's in for a film festival award in November, yeah.
I'm not surprised, because it obviously struck a chord with me. I can remember the whole thing. And like we've been saying, that is the power of different mediums of art. Because, if that was a video, it may well have done the same thing. And it probably, it could have worked for other people better than the animation did, but for me personally, it was a great example of exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, I forgot, kind of like, because that is the video for the Big Shark Pledge, but it's kind of also separate from Oceanic 31, but it is also a form of artwork, and it does have like a huge impact. I still remember watching it like on the big screen at Full Love Sharks in 2022 for the first time, where they turned them speakers up so you felt like the music in your chest, and even I got like quite teary, and I think I'd watched it about 30 times that day. So yeah, that's amazing. Abigail, I think you put your hand up again.
Yeah, sorry, there's so much to say about this.
Sorry.
It is absolutely beautiful as well. I mean, yeah, thanks for reminding me about that video, because that was such an incredible, moving thing to watch. It made me think about how I was thinking recently, like often it's tempting to say that, I mean, it is true that if you have the experience of going and swimming with a shark, or you get the chance to be out in the sea or immerse yourself in an environment, then you are going to connect. So often I want to think, like, how can I get people to actually get out there on the beachfront to connect? But then I was thinking, like, why do so many people grow up with, I don't know, a lion as their favorite animal, or a dolphin or whatever? And it's because of images and objects we have as children. It's because of storybooks, and it's because of, you know, beautiful pictures on wallpaper, or, you know, the teddies that we have. So therein is like a really good example of the power of art, because these are creations that are used around you as a child that you grow up with, and you gain such an emotional connection with, you know, that thing, that elephant or whatever it is. And you probably haven't gone and seen a lion. You might have seen one at the zoo, but that's not the reason necessarily that that's your favorite species. So yeah, just a note there that I was thinking about that example of why images are so important.
No, that kind of, when you said that, kind of resonated with me a little bit. And a lot of people don't know, but the reason I got into sharks is actually because when I was a child, I stole a book from a library on sharks. And it was photography, it wasn't art. I promise I'm not a criminal. I was a child and I wanted a book. And technically it's from a library, I just didn't ever take it back. But that, I literally read that all the time, seeing pictures of sharks, and that's kind of how I kind of fell in love with them. I couldn't swim until I was about 18, so I never swam with sharks. So it was literally that kind of love for that. That was photography, but I guess it's all kind of visual stuff that all kind of works the same. And another thing I want to talk about, not only does it identify, some of these pieces are identifying kind of the conservation issues, obviously Oceanic 31 for sharks, but I think Rachel's piece, what I love about that is that because it's got this whole ecosystem in there as well, it kind of showing that balance is, it can draw people into other type of conservation issues as well.
Yeah, so my work has really got themes of ecology and biodiversity loss as a whole, and I think similar to what we've already touched on is, you know, we've all seen these really graphic images of like deforestation and bleached reefs and overfishing, and it is really hard to look at. And I think the uniqueness of art is that you can invite the viewer in to connect to the natural world in a different way, but also still kind of get those messages across without them being quite as jarring. And I think with my style of work is that I really like people to spend a little bit longer to look at the piece, and, you know, it invites the viewer to spend that time and have more of thoughts about it. And we've talked already about, you know, there's these really recognizable iconic species that people might be really familiar with, but if you look inside the ecosystem as a whole, there's so much more there going on, and all these interactions which all play important roles. And I like to kind of invite them in to explore that whole hidden world that's in there as well. So, you know, the loss of sharks plays a role right down the trophic systems in the ecosystem, and so we might not love sharks, but we might love coral reefs, and, you know, these things are all connected. I'm sure everyone here does love sharks, but, you know, it's one of those things where nothing's like singular, and all these species do interact with each other, and that's kind of like the theme that I want to push forward for biodiversity loss, again, without showing these really upsetting images, but, you know, trying to communicate these important themes at the same time.
Fantastic. Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you very much, Rachel. And straight over to Janavi as well.
What I always find really interesting with the work I do is highlighting species right up to these sort of big iconic ones like sharks and whales and stuff like that, but also discussing the importance of even the tiniest fish, the tiniest seahorse. And it's understanding that the whole concept of like biodiversity is that every single species in our ecosystem has a role to play. And so what I always try to push forward, particularly on like my social media platforms, is I'm not particularly interested in whether you like sharks or not. It's just, do people understand that even if you hate them, even if you're scared of them, even if you'd never get in the water with them, if we don't advocate for their survival and preservation, if they're not there in our ocean, everything else falls apart. But that is the same, that's the whole sort of point in this concept of, you know, the trophic cascade, is that you take out any element and it has a ripple effect. So, you know, like obviously this Oceanic 31 is fantastic for highlighting sharks, obviously, but it's kind of like what we really need to be doing as conservation artists and as ocean artists is highlighting the importance of all of it. And I think obviously we're here all because we're advocating for sharks, but it is really important to always showcase all of the species that live in our ocean and just how vast the diversity is. And like when you go diving or you go walking along the seashore, even things like as small as anemones that you may not think twice about or you've seen them a million times, they all have a role to play. And it's really crucial that we kind of understand how that network connects and how it all relies on each other.
Yeah, I was just going to add on that sort of note of a holistic overview and the whole ecosystem being important, that the artist is in this sort of privileged position to be able to respond to that whole. I think scientists often have to sort of get more and more specialist to be able to provide the data that supports the policy making. So they tend to become like very expert in like one specific thing, whereas an artist can come in and respond to the science with this sort of step back overview and be able to sort of draw out all the elements that create the narrative that will capture the audience.
Yeah, I think like whenever like we go out and give talks about sharks, we're always talking about how sharks play that role in that balance in ecosystems, and it is literally a balance, and it is balanced all the way down on every single level. So without one, the rest kind of falls apart. And yeah, I love how we like I'll go and talk about that in like a presentation and try, or maybe I'll do like a game with like some kids or something like that and line them all up and get half of them to be plankton, half of them are fish, and then a couple of sharks, and kind of role play that out, and how that can be like so well. Like that could take me like an hour or something like that to teach someone that, but someone can look at that basking shark picture or any of your artworks and just see how all that balance works, how everything's connected, and they could get that within 30 seconds of looking at that piece of artwork. And I think that's what I think is quite magical about some of these pieces. Yeah. Abigail, did you put your hand up then? I think because, yeah, everything is so like data driven, kind of in that kind of policy aspect. But then I love the kind of public engagement bit, because you can't make an impact without the public engagement. So I think art can, as you guys have all demonstrated, play this huge role in that public awareness, public concern, and then public pressure, which can then make these kind of domino effects of decisions, which will hopefully not only help sharks, but again, the whole ecosystem, and then the oceans. We're going to be coming to the end of this one now, just because we're slightly running out of time. I'd like to thank you all for attending. Anyone listening, if you guys want to check out this exhibition, the final exhibition is going to be in the Royal Geographical Society in London. Thank you guys all for coming on here and talking about this. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you guys have too. And hopefully we can work together as well in the future. Keep doing what you're doing, because it is making an impact, as we've all just discussed. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Shark Trust podcast. My name's Louis, the person usually behind the camera. But on this rare occasion, I wanted to talk to you about the Oceanic 31 exhibition. It's been going on for almost 2 years now, and its final stop is at the Royal Geographical Society of London between November 25th and December the 5th. This is your last chance to see the exhibition before it's auctioned off, and if you love the art just as much as I have, then you have your chance to obtain the originals yourself. So why don't you visit superstars-auction.com/Shark Trust auction. All the money will be going towards our vital conservation work protecting sharks and rays. Thank you.